Archaic Records.
Hey, what's up, everybody? It's Archaic Records here with you again. My name is Jamie, coming at you from Nashville, Tennessee. Have you ever gotten turned on to a band that you were so impressed with that you almost immediately became like this super fanboy, only to have that band disappear in what seemed like the blink of an eye, to never be heard from again? Well, sadly, that was my experience when it comes to Bay Area Post Punk Revivalists in letter form. This was a band that I first discovered on June 12th, 2015, when my wife and I went to go see Peter Murphy at the DNA Lounge in San Francisco. Now, at the time we went to the show, my wife was going through a bit of a Peter Murphy phase. She was going back and sort of rediscovering a lot of Peter Murphy's solo material. As far as I was concerned, still am concerned, I've always been a very sort of casual Peter Murphy fan, maybe even sort of pseudo-casual Peter Murphy fan. That being said, I did go see Peter Murphy live one time back in probably 2005, 2006 in Seattle. And at that show in Seattle, I will say that he was unbelievable. So, of course, I was down to go see Peter Murphy live. I love the DNA Lounge in San Francisco. My wife was going through a big Peter Murphy phase, and I thought it was probably going to be a good show. So why not go check it out? I'm always down to go see live music anyway. So my wife and I got down to the DNA Lounge in San Francisco, which is one of my favorite venues in the city. We went in, found our place on the floor relatively close to the stage. And at showtime, and the opening band came out on stage, a band that I was completely unfamiliar with, a band that I had never seen or heard of before, a band called In Letter Form. As the band broke into their set, I was very much immediately impressed. This band had a very sort of retro, new wave, dark wave, post-punk kind of sound. That being said, it wasn't a novelty. It wasn't something that was completely nostalgia-based. This was sort of a modern take on it. But I loved their sound. They were heavy. They were dark. Great drumming, great bass playing, awesome guitar work. And for me, the highlight of the show was their singer and frontman, Eric Miranda. As the set continued on, I just felt myself becoming more and more drawn into their set. Probably about 3 or 4 songs into their show, I was standing there and I could literally feel my mouth hanging open. I mean, this was easily one of the best new bands I had seen in quite a long time. And the fact that the band was from Oakland, California, at least in my opinion, put another feather in their cap. I've mentioned this before on this channel. I am a very proud Oaklander. I may live in Tennessee now, but my heart is always in Oakland. So whenever I hear a band or an artist from Oakland, of course, they're going to be given a little bit more of the benefit of the doubt. In my opinion, this band did not need any benefit of the doubt. As far as I was concerned, this band completely blew me away. I don't remember if it was at that show after they played or if it was soon after, but I ran out and I bought the CD that they had out at the time. This was the first record. This was the record that they had out when I saw them live. The band left. My wife and I, as we usually do at shows, we had a brief conversation about the set, and we were both mightily impressed by In Letter Form. After that, Peter Murphy came out, and he pretty much stunk up the place. Like I said, I had seen Peter Murphy back in 2005 or 2006 in Seattle. And he was awesome the first time I ever saw him. But this show in San Francisco, he was not in peak form. I remember about 3 or 4 songs into the set, I looked over at my wife and I commented. I said, "Man, this is rough." And there was a young girl standing right in front of me who I believe I offended with my observation. She turned around and gave me a glare and had to remind me that he's a legend. I remember thinking to myself, I was just like, shut up, chick. I always love it when 19-year-olds feel compelled to inform you as to who has reached legendary status. I always find it interesting also the level of mediocrity that people are willing to accept as greatness. Now, I get it. If you are a young person, you haven't seen somebody like Peter Murphy before, you have all of these expectations in your head. Maybe it's great just to see him in person. I'm not going to argue with that. I've been in that position at shows before. But the fact of the matter is he just wasn't very good. And turning around and getting impatient with me over my observation wasn't going to make the show any better. Anyway, my wife and I sort of suffered through Peter Murphy's set. At the end of the night, we left. I considered it to be a big win, however, because I had just gotten turned on to a new band, which I considered to be a real treat, a band that I would become a big fan of moving forward. In 2016, my wife and I went to go see Peter Murphy once again, this time at the House of Blues in New Orleans. And I can tell you without any hesitation that was the single worst show I've ever been to in my entire life. Peter Murphy came out on stage and immediately, right from the get-go in the first song, he started fighting with the sound technician. After the first song, Peter Murphy threw a tantrum and walked off the stage, where he remained off the stage for probably what legitimately seemed like probably 10 or 15 minutes, at which point he sort of begrudgingly came back out on stage, where he began verbally abusing both the sound crew and the audience. After the second song, or maybe halfway through the second song, he once again left the stage, only to come back a third time, at which point in time, my wife and I pretty much were done, and we decided to leave the show. Peter Murphy is somebody that, since that night, I have not listened to probably once. He's somebody that I will not support ever again after seeing that display that he put on in New Orleans at the House of Blues. And for me, I mean, honestly, Peter Murphy, at this point in time, is just sort of a piece of shit as far as I'm concerned. There's really no excuse for that type of behavior. To me, there's nothing punk rock about being an abusive prick. Now, you may be saying to yourself, Morrissey is no cupcake either. And you're right, and I would never disagree with you when you say that, but I also am somebody who does not defend Morrissey when he acts like a butt on stage. But I have also never seen in person or heard any stories of anything even remotely close, Morrissey doing anything remotely close to what Peter Murphy pulled that night at the House of Blues in New Orleans. And quite frankly, Peter Murphy just doesn't have the talent to back it up. He's not good enough, in my opinion, to have that behavior come across as charming. To me, Bauhaus was okay. Peter Murphy's solo career is probably even less, okay. I understand there's a lot of people that are big Bauhaus fans. I see a lot of people out there in the world, wearing Bauhaus shirts. Oftentimes, I feel like the people I see wearing Bauhaus shirts are people that probably couldn't pass the 3-song test, if you know what I mean. But, that being said, I think that Peter Murphy probably does have, a big, legitimate fan base. But at the same time, if you don't want to do this anymore, if this is something that has become a burden to you, then just don't do it. This is your job. It's a privilege to do what you do for a living. And if this is something that you feel at this point in time you are being held hostage by, there are 2 types of problems in the world as far as I'm concerned. There are my problems, and there are not my problems. And that's not my problem. If Peter Murphy is somebody who feels like, he does not want to tour anymore, he doesn't want to perform live, but he feels obligated to, I guess that is the financial corner that you can sometimes paint yourself into when you spend all of your money on meth and DUIs. In 2019... Of course, it was announced that Bauhaus were going to be doing a reunion tour, and I immediately, maybe this is me just being cynical, but I immediately thought of this as being nothing more than a cash grab. Knowing what I do know about Peter Murphy and having seen his behavior in person and his attitude in person, I can imagine that for Peter Murphy, this was not, a celebration of the music. This was not a gift back to the fans for their years of support. This was nothing more than an opportunity for him to pad his bank account. And of course, if you read any reviews of those Bauhaus shows by critics, of course, the shows were hailed. It's very predictable what critics are going to celebrate. And when I saw that the Bauhaus reunion tour was going on, I knew it was something that people were going to be basically wetting their pants over. But based on my experience, having seen him live 3 times, especially the last time I saw him in New Orleans in 2016, he's somebody that I personally won't support, and I'm really not even a big enough fan to have been super interested in the 2019 Bauhaus reunion. In 2022, it was announced that Bauhaus were going back on hiatus so that Peter Murphy could, I guess, focus on his health. He was going back into rehab. Now, of course, as a human being, I wish him nothing but the best. I don't have anything personal against the guy. But as far as I was concerned, those Bauhaus shows were something I couldn't have possibly cared less about. Anyway, enough about Peter Murphy. I mentioned that I had seen him in 2016 in New Orleans at the House of Blues. My wife and I were living in New Orleans in 2016. And by this point in time, I had become a very big In Letter Form fan. In 2015, the band released their second record, Fracture, Repair, Repeat. This was a record that I was listening to on very heavy rotation back in those days. My wife and I were living in New Orleans in 2016, a time of our lives that was not, things were not going very smoothly. And I don't know if you've ever really been to New Orleans as a tourist, or maybe you live there, or maybe you currently live there. But in my personal experience with New Orleans to me is one of my favorite cities in the country, if not easily my top 5 favorite cities in the country. It's a place that when you go to visit, it is very seductive. It's beautiful. Obviously, it has great music, great art, architecture, great food, great nightlife, great drinking, awesome cemeteries. The culture is interesting. The people are genuinely pretty friendly and hospitable. But as a place to live, I will tell you that, and I've lived lots of places around this country, I will tell you that New Orleans is easily my least favorite place to live. For one thing, the place that I was working, at least in New Orleans, we basically had no customers. I was not making hardly any money. We were living in a very, very rough part of town. And I found the entire experience to be quite depressing, actually. I remember one day I was at work. I was feeling particularly low, as it was. And this was on, I want to get the date right on this. This was September 4th, 2016. I was sitting at work, not really doing anything. I got a text message from my wife, and I remember distinctly it said, in letter form, guy died. And as I mentioned before, as I have mentioned before on these videos in the past, this is something that I take maybe unnaturally hard when I hear of the passing of musicians and artists that I'm a fan of. But I think it particularly hit me hard when in letter form vocalist Eric Miranda passed away. And anyway, I remember seeing that text. I should go back and say, I remember seeing that text, and I was like, what? In letter form guy died? And I remember, so I looked it up online, and sure enough, it said that in letter form, singer Eric Miranda had passed away. Now, going back to what I was saying before, I always take these things really hard. It was no different when I heard about the passing of Eric Miranda. Now, despite the fact that this was an Oakland band, I consider myself to be an Oakland guy. Of course, this was somebody I never met. This was just an artist I liked, somebody who I related to, somebody whose music I was a big fan of. But it just hit me incredibly hard, and I think because Our lives in New Orleans at the time were not going very smoothly. I was going through a very hefty bout of depression in general at the time, based on the situation that my wife and I were in, both financially and professionally. I just took the knees out from under me. I remember later that day, I was sitting at work, not really doing anything, again, because there wasn't much to do at that job I had. And I remember I was sitting there and I was just feeling very, very down, and I was thinking a lot about the band in letter form. I was thinking about the singer Eric Miranda, what the music meant to me, what his lyrics meant to me. And as I was sitting there sort of half daydreaming, I noticed across the room this little cockroach had snuck into the business. Now you may be saying to yourself, oh man, that's disgusting. But this is New Orleans, my friends. And if you've ever been to New Orleans, you know that that is bug central down there, and cockroaches are the least of your concerns. It's pretty hard to get away from them. But anyway, as I was sitting there, sitting in this chair, just doing nothing, I started watching this cockroach as he was just kind of zigzagging around, doing his little thing, whatever cockroaches do, probably looking for a morsel to snack on. And I remember that it sort of like cheered me up for a second. I felt as if I had like a little friend in there. And I know that sounds probably sad and pathetic, but that's the way it felt at the time. And I just became really intrigued on what he was doing, and I couldn't take my eyes off him. And not long after that, one of my coworkers entered the room, and the cockroach kind of ran right in front of him, and of course he just smashed it with his foot. And then he did the exaggerated thing where he really like grind it into the ground. And I remember it just really bummed me out. I remember thinking, like, man, what a shitty way for your life to end, to have some hillbilly come up and just grind you into like just particles, basically. I remember I got really super depressed about the death of that cockroach. I think it was a lot of things at that point in time that were going on in my life that all hit me at once. Not least of which being the singer of In Letter Form passing away, which I had found out that same day. And it's funny because there's still times, and I'm thinking about it right now because I'm telling the story, but there are times when I actually think about that cockroach. I don't know what it was. There's something about him. He cheered me up for a couple minutes, so wherever he is today also. Thinking about you, buddy. Anyway, let's get into the band In Letter Form just a little bit. This is their first record. This record was released on March 7th, 2014. This record was out by the time that I discovered the band in 2015. If you are unfamiliar with In Letter Form, they are definitely a heavily influenced band on, 80s dark new wave. That being said, they do put a modern twist on it. They do have their own sound. This isn't just, nostalgia for nostalgia's sake. But if you are a fan of bands like Joy Division in particular, especially if you like the vocals of Ian Curtis, I think you would love the vocals of Eric Miranda. He is very heavily influenced, you can tell by Ian Curtis, both in sort of the way his voice sounds and his sort of cadence, and also kind of his use of the language lyrically. Also another big influence on this band is Echo and the Bunnymen, one of my top 5 favorite bands of all time. This band has a lot of Wall of Voodoo influence in them. Bauhaus, I would say early U2, maybe even a little bit of sort of 70s, spaceship Rush thrown in there. All of that mixed together with some sort of modern components has really created what I think is still one of my favorite, and I use the term new now in air quotes, but one of my favorite new bands. And of course, as I mentioned before, this band is from Oakland, California, which is, in my opinion, pretty snug. Anyway, let's get into this first record just a little bit. As I mentioned, this record came out in 2014. The first song on this record is called End Days. A really cool way to start the album. I love the bass intro. One thing I love about this band is, for one thing, they have one of the best bassists I've ever heard, or at least heard recently in a newer band. Peter Desan, I'm sure I'm totally mispronouncing that. I'm terrible with names, especially anything that isn't Smith or Johnson. But Peter Desan is one of my favorite newer bassists. But one thing I love about this band is, they create this great wall of sound, but within that wall of sound, you can easily sort of pick out the guitar, bass, drum, synthesizers, and Eric Miranda's voice. The song has a great bass intro, really drops the record in. This is a very sort of epic post-punk song. It's got big wailing guitars, great vocals, kind of mysterious and dark. I love that song. The second song on this record is a song called Closer. This is a song that I interpret as being kind of about unrequited love, sort of the frustration one feels when they are in a one-sided platonic relationship. That's a situation that I have found myself in the past. When I was going to college, I immediately became friends with this girl right when I began going to college, and her and I became very good friends for probably, I'd say, a little over a calendar year. We hung out all the time. We went record shopping. We hung out on campus all the time. And I had these really strong feelings for her. But at the time, I didn't have the confidence or the social skills, I guess, to sort of approach taking it to that next level. At a certain point in time, she started dating another dude, and I got really uptight about it. I couldn't handle it. And eventually it sort of ended our friendship because I ended up just turning into a complete butt over the situation. I actually had to have, one of my friends kind of talk me down and be like, dude, you should have, swung when you were a bat, if you know what I'm saying. Anyway, the next song after that is a song called Lie to Me. This song is a real ode to New Order, very poppy, sort of new wave, dark wave crossover. A song about, the initial heartbreak over, going through a breakup, sort of getting through that, and then realizing you're probably in a better place, especially when the ex that you broke up with comes back, makes an attempt to rekindle the situation. Probably the worst relationship I've ever been in my entire life was with my most recent ex. Her and I were together for 5 years. We, at some point in time, I think it was after maybe 3 years, we broke up. We were separated for a few months, and she reapproached me and presented me the opportunity of giving it another go. A situation that, for some reason, I leapt at, and sure enough, things were even worse the second time than they were the first time, which was not great to begin with. I was telling somebody the other day, it's like, taking a bite of something and saying, oh my God, this is terrible. And you eat the whole plate of it. That was my experience with it. That's sort of what the song Lie to Me reminds me of. Sort of going through a breakup and realizing, after you get through that initial suckage of it, you realize that you're probably better off. The next song after that is the title track, Explorations of Unknown Destinations. To me, this is sort of that kind of I would follow you to the end of the earth type of song. It's not a bad song. It's not my favorite song on the record. Maybe, one of a couple songs that might be a couple of the weaker ones, in my opinion. I don't think there's anything bad on this record. But for me, the title track might be one of the lesser songs. The next song after that is called Laura is Dead Part 2. I love this song. It is very Joy Division. I mentioned earlier that in letter form, singer and songwriter Eric Miranda is definitely a big Joy Division fan, definitely a big Ian Curtis fan. Not that that's a bad thing. I'm not saying that as a dig. But they definitely have a lot of Joy Division on this song. This is a song about being loyal to someone even if it's at your own peril. This is something that I can heavily relate to. One of my many fatal flaws, if you will, is I tend to be a victim of my own niceness on occasion, and I'm very much a people pleaser. Sort of in the vein of this song a little bit. I am a people pleaser even if it comes at my own expense. I would oftentimes put other people's happiness, in fact, I'm known for putting other people's happiness ahead of mine a lot of times, even as I mentioned before, even if it's at your own peril or your own detriment. I really like this song a lot. The next song after that is called These Days Go By. This is another big Ian Curtis inspired tune. Really beautiful vocal performance. I think it's one of Eric Miranda's best vocal performances on the record. This song is basically, again, about the death of a relationship. I have a feeling that Eric Miranda, when he was writing a lot of these songs, he was going through that. I think that seems to be one of the reoccurring themes on this record. But I really love that song a lot. The next song is called Again. To me, this song sounds a little bit like early post-punk Cure before the Cure went way goth, mixed with sort of early Echo and the Bunnymen vibes. This one has a big guitar, driving bass. Instrumentally, this is probably my favorite song on the record. This song, I think, is about, being trapped in your own mind, kind of the overwhelming, deafness of loneliness. I love this song. Like I said, it's probably instrumentally, probably the best song on the record. To me, this is like what in letter form sound like instrumentally. And again, I love the vocals. I love the lyrics on this song. It is very dark. Like I said, sort of like being a prisoner trapped inside your own head. The next song after that is probably my favorite song on the entire record. This song is called Am Regret. This is a cozy little jingle about stalking, more or less. In the song, he tells a story about how he ends up at a party where his ex is attending with her new fella. And he's so distraught, and he is in such a deep state of despair that he doesn't even really, quite know how he got there. Later at the end of the night, he talks about how it's 3 a.m. He's sober with no place to go, no one to talk to, and no one to lay next to. Probably my favorite song on the record. It is haunting. It is epic. And it is pretty dark, I must say. And the next song after that is a song called Strangers. To me, this song has kind of like a 70s spaceship era Rush kind of like feel to it. Probably not my favorite song on the record. It also, after you kind of get through the kind of like the Rush 70s intro, it kind of goes into like an early U2 meets New Order kind of vibe. Like I said, it's not my favorite song on the record. I think when you kind of tie anything to Rush, I kind of get like disinterested in it. I do like the part of the song where it sounds more like early U2 kind of meets New Order. I like the song. Like I said, there's nothing bad on this record, but it's probably my least favorite. The last song on this record is a song called Killing the Time. This is a very Echo and the Bunnymen inspired song. Wouldn't say it's a happy song by any stretch of the imagination. But in the standards of in letter form, this thing is ecstatic. This song is just basically about desperately wanting a love to last forever. It kind of gives you the feeling, it sort of makes me think of, that sort of cute honeymoon phase of a relationship that most people have experienced. where you think to yourself, man, I just want this to last forever. Anyway, the band would release their second and final album, Fracture, Repair, Repeat, on May 26th, 2016. Now, if you like the last album, with all of its anxiety and loneliness and depression and longing and suicidal innuendo and misery, but you're thinking to yourself, all that is pretty good, but I'm really kind of in the market for something a little less cheery. In other words, if bleakness is your weakness, have I got a product for you, my friends? Anyway, like I mentioned, this record came out in May of 2016. I bought this record right when it came out, and of the two records that In Letter Form released, and sadly they only put out these two records, this one is by far, in my opinion, the superior of the two. Now, I love this record, but I don't listen to this one as much as I listen to this one. I still listen to this one all the time. This one is on heavy rotation in my house. Really has been ever since it came out. And of course, as I mentioned, Eric Miranda passed away not too long after this record came out. I unfortunately only got to see the band that one time live at the DNA Lounge, opening for Peter Murphy. But this record is one that I really, really love. If you're only going to own one, which you shouldn't, I would definitely make it this one. Anyway, the first song on this record is called Face in the Crowd. To me, it has a very early U2 guitar kind of sound. This song is heavy, it's eerie, it's got an epic vocal performance. Eric Miranda on this song, I would say, on this record, I would say, especially this song, but on this album in general, he really kind of like does more with his voice. The vocals on this record, and this is not a slight, this is not a criticism, but the vocals on this first record are a little bit more monotone. I would say on the second record, Fracture, Repair, Repeat, he really kind of flexes his voice more. He gives it more, there's a lot more moodiness in his voice. And this song is a great example of that. Very epic vocal performance. I think his vocal performance and his songwriting on the second record is better, and I think the band's performance on the record is better. Again, I say this as somebody who's a fan and somebody who, I take this stuff way too hard sometimes, but, I think we all, as music fans, especially if you're a fan of this band, we just trying to, in my head, I tried to figure out where this band was going to go with this stuff, because I think this band was really on the trajectory to really become one of the really elite bands of all time. Anyway, the second song is called Won't Get the Best of Me. This song is kind of a Smiths meets Bauhaus. It's got the jangly kind of Johnny Marr guitar. This song sounds to me like it's about being a slave to your own mental health. Literally lying in bed, shrouded in your feelings, trying to muster up the energy to even get up and face the day. Really dark. I love that song. The next song is called Wait Now. I love this song. If you haven't seen the video for this song, you can go back and find it on YouTube. There were 3 songs off of this second record that the band made videos for. Wait Now was one of them. It is an amazing song, great guitar. This song is epic, it's driving, it's up-tempo, it's angry, it's sad. And again, this is another one of those songs where Eric Miranda really lets his voice hang out a little bit. I mean, his voice on this song gives me goosebumps. Every time I've heard it, I've heard this song a million times, and every time it affects me the same way. The next song on this record is called Terror is a State of Mind, which is not only my favorite song off this record, it's probably my favorite song in the band's catalog. This song is about the use of scare tactics to get people, and really more importantly, their money, to plant their butts in the house of God on every Sunday. It talks about using the concept of eternal hellfire as a mechanism of control. I mean, that really is, fear, if you think about it, is, as good a deterrent or as good a use of control as anything, really. It also talks about the anxiety and guilt one fears or one faces when leaving a church setting. I've said this to my wife. My parents, when I was a kid, my parents made plenty of mistakes when I was a kid. Everybody's parents do. But one thing I'm eternally grateful for, at least in my family, was that I was not raised in a religious setting. Both of my parents were kind of flower children-ish, very hippie, very liberal. So I was never forced to deal with the guilt of possibly leaving a church or changing my sort of spiritual philosophy. My wife, grew up in a church setting, and she is not practicing, any sort of religion really at this point in time. And I do know that there are times when, she does feel, anxiety and guilt over her lack of participation because of the way that she was raised. And I'm not knocking the way that she was raised, but she, it's one thing that her and I just don't have in common. We talk about, religious upbringing. My dad grew up in a religious setting. That's something I think that my parents did the right thing on. Anyway, Terrorist State of Mind is probably my favorite song by the band in its entire catalog. The next song after that is called Highline. This song is very heavily influenced, I get the feeling, by Echo and the Bunnymen. To me, this song is basically about the act of self-medication to deal with loneliness, depression, basically any other sort of mental health issues. It is very dark. I think lyrically it is one of the best songs on the record. I think a lot of people, including myself in the past, have been guilty of sort of self-medicating to at least attempt to cure those types of symptoms. The next song after that is a song called Edison's Medicine. To me, this is a gut-wrenching and honest look at addiction. This song cuts through all the lies and the denial. In this song, Eric Miranda opens up about his damaged and vulnerable heart. I think this is a very honest look at the idea of addiction, at least in a song. I know, sometimes addiction is something that is, kind of simplified and, kind of interpreted by the media and by musicians. When this song first came out, when I first heard this song, I didn't love it. This wasn't necessarily my favorite song by the band, but over the years, this has become one of my favorite songs on the record. It is haunting. It is really dark. It is really honest. And this is one of the 3 songs also on the record that has a video. You should go back and check it out on YouTube. The next song after that is called 111. This song is about regret and the desire to right what we have wronged. I really like this song a lot. Kind of, again, a very sort of Joy Division influenced song. Eric Miranda was obviously a huge Ian Curtis fan. I don't think I'm talking out of school when I say that. The next song after that is a song called Reflecting the Rain. Probably my second favorite song by the band. This song is pretty much perfect in every way. This is another song. The third song in the band's catalog that has a video that you should go check out on YouTube. This song is beautiful. I mean, Eric Miranda's voice on this song is amazing. This song is, like I said, this song is pretty much perfect in every way. Probably only behind Terror's State of Mind is my favorite song in the relatively small in letter form catalog. The next song after that ends the record. A song called Mal de Mer, and I think basically the song is about suicide. Pretty sure that's what it basically sounds like in the lyrics and the vocals. What better way to end an in letter form record than with basic, straightforward song about ending your own life? To me, like I said, this is the band's, of the two records that the band put out, Fraction, Repair, Repeat to me is a lot better than Explorations of Unknown Destinations. But both of these records to me are absolutely incredible. I think, obviously the loss of singer Eric Miranda in 2016 is the greatest tragedy to befall this band. There's no question about that. But musically speaking, I would be really curious to see where this band was going to go moving forward. This is still one of my favorite new bands out there. I know that the first record came out in 2014, which is going to be 10 years old next year. That completely shocks me every time I say I can't believe that Eric Miranda next year will have been passed away for 8 years. But anyway, if you haven't checked out In Letter Form, or if you're not familiar with their work, I would go back and listen to these two records, especially Fracture, Repair, Repeat. To me, this thing is pretty much a masterpiece, start to finish. I will say that apart from David Bowie's Black Star album, this was probably my second favorite record from 2016. So do yourself a favor and go back and check out Oakland, California's Dark Wavers in letter form. Anyway, man, thank you so much for checking out this video. This is Archaic Records. My name is Jamie, coming at you from Nashville, Tennessee. Be sure to go out and support your local record store. Check back every week for Morrissey Monday, my weekly celebration of all things Morrissey and the Smiths, as well as other record content throughout the week. And until next time, my friends, talk to you then.